Well, I have to say, I'm from a Dutch heritage. My Dutch family all migrated to Holland, Michigan, where I ended up growing up. And on my mother's side, it was all musicians. Her father, my grandfather, was a band leader and taught all the instruments. And so he had all the instruments in his house. And my mother played a lot of them too. But he was teaching all the instruments. Actually, the great story was, except he couldn't play the accordion. So my mother was 8, and he said, learn that instrument so that if I happen to get a student, you can teach him. And she did. So it started young. I saw the flute and my grandpa's array of instruments. And I just said, that's what I want. And so I got the flute right away, and Grandpa, of course, gave me a lot of lessons on that, and that worked pretty good for family member. We did well together. They moved to California eventually, but we'd always visit, and so it was always family bands. It would be my mom. My uncle was on the tuba. Mom was she played piano, saxophone. She could even play the drums. And then we went to California. Many of the family members were musicians, so it was always family bands and going to play at a church or a school or somewhere at Christmas. And a lot of music, and my brother played the clarinet, and we'd do trios with my mom, and my dad was the recording engineer. He says, somebody needs to record them. I don't play anything, but I can push the record button, which he did. So we had those reel-to-reel recordings of us when we were kids playing together, which was sweet because we found them later and got to listen to the old days, how that started. And so as I grew into the flute more and more, it was a natural to me. The flute was just a natural thing to me. So I ended up just playing, in the school things, and I was always the first flute and always just playing the flute like I was supposed to play the flute. And then I think right out of high school, I got a chance to do an interlocking thing, which was a good thing in Michigan. Now in Michigan, you're at North, and they had good music camps, and you're with a lot of kids, big groups of kids playing music. And so that was a good experience to jump into studying, really, more studying. And so I took a gentle route of studying because I tried college, university. It wasn't really my thing. I didn't like closed classroom. I wanted a little more open opportunity, but I studied. I studied Berkeley School of Music, first classical, playing in orchestras, Berkeley School of Music, playing with jazz. But I found my best school was just playing with other people eventually. Because I could play at it. So the theory is good and all that's good. And it's good to set it aside so you can do it without necessarily thinking, without having the intellectual process, which is there and it's not there. It's an interesting connection. First you have all that intellectual process going, but then you don't want to think about theory. People say, well, how do you know how to play such and such a chord and improvise on it? Well, I know people teach improvisation, but I just felt that. So jazz was a big love because I could improvise with a structure, because jazz has a structure. So you'd still have a chord pattern and you're improvising. Well, then around Dean and Dudley almost come in here, just about, but I took on the harp because actually I played flute with harpist and I thought that was a nice combo, and it is pretty. And my harpists, I knew they'd get pregnant and have families and then they couldn't play with me anymore. I said, well, I'll just get me a harp. So I'd rented a harp, and Jade was then a baby. So my process, my focus, and created a process to just learn that intuitively, because I'm going to play for a baby falling asleep. I'm not going to study. I don't even know really how, but I'll figure it out. But I don't want to think about it. And so she'd fall asleep, and I'd close my eyes and just start playing. So that was a different approach. And that was just a little bit before New Age. And here I am, a mother playing harp to her baby, and along come Dean and Dudley. And they are two people with that same image of just playing music because the birds are singing or something. In my case, it was the baby was sleeping. And so the first time Dean and I played together, and Dudley also with her on her harp and stuff, but the first time we played together, I mean, there had to be no thinking, there had to be nothing. I remember in the beginning, I'd say, would you want to know what key I'm in or something, Dean? No, it's okay. And we wouldn't even talk about it. Sometimes it's fun. It's fun to think back on how we'd start then of course start a recording. I mean, with his new little systems he had, a recording in the kitchen, unplug the refrigerator, or in halls and church halls, or where the acoustics were good. And there was times in studios, I recall, how did we start before we played? We look at each other and we just start laughing. I mean, we'd just be laughing like crazy. And then we'd start to play. I guess that laughter is I don't know. It was one of the things that we seemed to just tap into. Then he put headphones on us with bird sounds, nature sounds. And then we'd sit and listen to that first. And then without speaking or even, usually we look at each other. It was separated between the glass. We'd watch each other and play to the birds, but together. So our voice was, it was like two people playing, but it was one flow. And it would just flow. I know, I mean, I've tried to play like that with a lot of different people throughout time in the last 40 years, since I started playing that with Dean. And that doesn't happen often. Maybe more so now. Young people now, there's so many free thinkers and so many free people. I think, it's like playing with Scott this weekend at the anniversary. Scott blew my socks off. He was just a trip to play with. And so it was thrilling to come here and hook up with these sounding musicians. Because that's where that juice is. That type of juice is happening here. And so this was cool. I was reluctant, I'm just kind of set in the tropics. I love living where I live. I built a house there on the hillside, and I'm just, at this age, I'm really happy there. I play music in different places. I have the other different things I do, whether it's classical, and I started an orchestra. I played in a mariachi orchestra. I play New Age somewhere, or by myself on the harp is right now mostly by myself. But I've had all sorts of combinations of musical collaboration there. For 38 years, I've been fortunate to collaborate with a lot of Mexican musicians, interesting Mexican musicians, and how they took me on. Because both my partner Ron, the guitar player, we moved there when we first moved there. And to slide into a new culture, if you're observant and if you're kind and observant, you can slide into that culture comfortably. Well, in Yalapa, for instance, Jade was in the school. They didn't even know my name. I was Jade's mother, because that's who I was. I'd go to Puerto Vallarta to work, then I was the Rachel, the musician. And those Mexican musicians were so nice to us. They would help us. We'd play with them, of course, in a quartet or something, but they would help us if we were out of work. We'd go, okay, we were working over there. We don't have any work now. And there's times we just lived off our fish and fruit off the trees, but they would help us get work. They'd help us set up an interview somewhere. Really kind, supportive energy of Mexican musicians. And I live in an area that's just a Mexican neighborhood now. I moved into town in PTL, a little suburb area where I built my house. And they just seem to be so supportive of and free. You can be whoever you are. I mean, Scott could put himself in the middle of those areas and nobody would say, oh my, look at him. Because he's so full of energy. You don't look at you twice. I'd run to work with my high heels on and my stuff, running down the cobblestones because I had to play somewhere. And they don't look at you like you're odd, because everybody does their own thing. Really, I love that about Mexico. People can do their own thing and they're just supported for it. You're not stared at because you are sticking out some way. Like Jade in school, she was 2 heads taller than most of her little Mexican friends on her, but she didn't even notice that she was different than them because they were doing it together. Just nice. So there I am. I'm in Mexico. And Dean and Dudley and I, we kept recording together different times when I was in town. Much of it was before I really left, but then I'd come back and we'd record together. But this last 2 or 3 years ago, they came to Mexico to record our last recording together. And they stayed in Yalapa, and he got new bird sounds. And then we had a recording studio in Vallarta that I set up for us. And we hadn't recorded together for a while. So it was like, I was like kind of nervous, like, oh, I haven't played with Dean. We went in that studio. Within 1 minute, there we were, just floating into our space that we seem to create when we're together. And the engineer there, he's a good friend of mine, and he had just recorded this big band, a rock pop band, a rock sort of pop band. He said every day, they come in and they're hungover and there's heavy vibe. And we came in, and he sat in his chair, the recording chair, with his headphones on. He just sat back. He was like, oh. And after every take, we just did however many takes we did. We just did one and another. And Paolo, this Italian guy that was recording us in Puerto Vallarta, he just was like so happy. They didn't want to charge us for our recording because they loved the music so much. And Dean and Dudley's, no, we're going to pay you. It was a beautiful, beautiful recording session together. And then now I'm here. So I played with them 3 years ago there. And now with all of the Soundings musicians together. Last night was just spectacular. A spectacular gathering of all kinds of energy. Not just musical, people's energies coming together was spectacular.